Every time you react, they gain ground. Every time you stay calm, you reclaim it. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to argue. You don't even need to walk away in anger. Because toxic people don't thrive on your presence. They thrive on your reaction. The real strength isn't in fighting back. It's in becoming so steady, so rooted in yourself, that no storm can shake you. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. This isn't about surviving difficult people. It's about becoming untouchable, not by closing the door on others, but by closing the gate to your peace of mind. Here's a hard truth most avoid. Toxic people are not your biggest problem. Your reaction to them is. You can quit the job, cut off the friend, move across the world. But here's what no one tells you. You can't run from what you haven't mastered. You can change the scenery 10 times, but if your emotional resilience hasn't grown, someone new will trigger the same wound, and you'll be back in the same loop, just with a different face. Epictetus said it clearly. It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Toxic people don't hold real power. They don't win because they're stronger. They win when you haven't trained your mind to stay grounded. Here's what that looks like in the real world. Let's say you work with someone. We'll call her Karen. Every meeting she slips in a jab, passive-aggressive, subtle. But you know it's aimed at you. Your chest tightens. You want to respond. You want to set the record straight. But you don't. You breathe. You look her in the eye, not with anger, but with clarity. You speak, not louder, but calmer. You stay rooted in your own energy. That's not weakness. That's power under control. That's emotional intelligence. That's stoicism in practice. And what happens next? She escalates. Her voice rises. Why? Because your stillness reveals her instability. She doesn't want truth. She wants attention. And when you stop reacting, you stop feeding her. Here's why this matters. Most people live like emotional puppets. One sarcastic comment ruins their day. One manipulative text keeps them up all night. One guilt trip makes them question their worth. But the Stoics offered a radical shift. No one controls your mind unless you hand them the keys. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't need to win every argument. What you need is discipline. Discipline to stay calm in chaos. Discipline to choose peace over provocation. Discipline to protect your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. Here's the takeaway. The most effective way to deal with toxic people isn't through confrontation. It's through detachment. They feed on your attention. They grow in your reactions. They manipulate through your need to be understood. Starve that. Withdraw the fuel. They fade. Mental strength is quiet. It's not in what you say. It's in what you no longer feel the need to say. It's the ability to sit in silence while someone else spirals, and know none of it belongs to you. You don't have to change them. You just need to control how much of you they can reach. And that starts with your response, or the lack of it. Because the moment you stop reacting, you stop bleeding power. And that's when you become dangerous, in the most peaceful, unshakable way. Let's get this straight. Toxic people aren't powerful. They're just practiced. They've spent years learning how to provoke emotion. They know which words stir guilt, which silences create doubt. But that doesn't make them strong. It just means they've rehearsed a game. And now you've outgrown it. It's not weakness. It's reflex. You're not reacting because you're broken. You're reacting because no one ever taught you how not to. It's muscle memory, instinct. You're stepping into emotional conflict without training and wondering why you keep getting hit. Imagine walking into a boxing ring with a seasoned fighter. You'd take a lot of hits, not because they're cruel, but because you never learned how to guard, how to move, how to protect yourself. It's the same with toxic people. You're walking into a psychological battle with no preparation, no strategy, and no armor, and then blaming them for the bruises. But the Stoics didn't blame the opponent. They trained for the fight. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." If one comment can ruin your mood, if a single message can derail your peace, the problem isn't them. It's the lack of emotional discipline within. Let's bring it into the real world. Toxic people don't just accidentally hurt you. They repeat the same patterns again and again. You forgive. They cross the line again. You explain. They twist your words again. You show vulnerability. They use it against you again. It's not confusion. It's not a misunderstanding. It's a system they've learned to run. But you keep shifting strategies, arguing, explaining, overthinking. Not because you're weak, but because your mind is reacting from chaos, not clarity. And then one day, it shifts. You stop responding. You stop defending. You stop needing to be understood. And that's the moment you stop being prey and start becoming presence. You stop playing their game and start writing your own rules. Because mental strength is trained, not inherited. Ask any elite performer, athlete, soldier, leader. Resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you earn. You don't build emotional immunity by reading quotes. You build it in the hard moments, when someone tries to provoke you and you stay grounded. When you want to lash out, but you breathe instead. When you feel disrespected, but respond with stillness. That is self-mastery. That is emotional intelligence in action. And make no mistake, this kind of discipline doesn't look soft. It looks terrifying to the people who thrive on emotional chaos. Because when you stop reacting, you stop being controlled. And when they lose control of you, they lose their illusions of power. Let's be clear. That toxic person in your life isn't powerful. They've just practiced their dysfunction longer than you've practiced your discipline. But the moment you commit to training, to sharpening your awareness, to holding your ground, to choosing inner peace over external drama, you become untouchable. You're not fragile. You're just untrained. And the training begins now. Let's cut through the noise. Every time someone pulls a reaction out of you, rage, defensiveness, guilt, they're not revealing your truth. They're stealing your power. You're not standing up for yourself. You're handing the remote control of your emotional state to someone who doesn't even respect your peace. Epictetus said it best. Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. Let's clear up a myth. Not reacting doesn't make you weak. Staying calm isn't being passive. It's choosing presence over impulse. Reacting is easy. It's automatic. True power lies in conscious response, in choosing intention over chaos, in standing still while the storm passes through you. That's the high-performance mindset. That's the essence of strength. Let's bring it to life. You come home after a long day. Your partner, irritated, says, "Must be nice to only think about yourself." The old you snaps, raises your voice, lists everything you've done. Old arguments resurface, hours wasted. But the trained you pause, you breathe, and you ask yourself the only question that matters. Do I want to win this moment or master myself? Ask yourself, what outcome do I really want, peace or proof? Then respond, quietly, clearly. Let's talk when we're both ready to actually listen. No fight, no defense, just calm authority. That's not silence, that's strategy. That's emotional intelligence at the executive level. Why we react. The ego trap. Here's what most people never pause to realize. We don't react because they're right. We react because our ego is fragile. We feel insulted and crave validation. We feel attacked and rush to defend. We feel unseen and scramble to be understood. But if your peace is tied to how others perceive you, you'll spend your life bankrupt, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, every time someone disapproves of you. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, you always have the option of having no opinion. Read that again. You don't have to explain. You don't have to engage. You don't even have to care. That's not detachment. That's discipline. The takeaway is this. Every time you react emotionally to a toxic person, you reinforce their illusion of control. You give them what they're seeking, your energy, your peace, your attention. But when you stay calm, not cold, not dismissive, just steady, you shift the entire dynamic. You stop playing their game, and without your participation, they lose their script. Because emotional control isn't about suppression. It's about selection. You decide what earns your energy, and most of what toxic people say doesn't. So next time someone tries to pull you into their storm, pause, breathe, anchor yourself, master the moment. Because the most powerful person in the room is rarely the loudest. It's the one who chooses their silence with purpose. In a world addicted to noise, silence gets mistaken for surrender. But real power knows. Stillness isn't weakness, it's command. We've been conditioned to believe that if you don't clap back, you've lost. If you don't explain yourself, they win. If you don't speak up, you're weak. But silence isn't retreat. It's restraint. It's stoicism. It's strength without spectacle. The psychology of silence. Toxic people feed on reaction. They need your words, your defenses, your emotions, because it gives them a part to play. The victim, the martyr, the misunderstood hero. But when you go silent, truly silent, you cut the script. And suddenly, they have nothing to perform against. They scramble. They provoke. They get louder. Why? Because your calmness exposes their chaos. Seneca once said, "He who does not know how to be silent does not know how to speak." Until you've mastered restraint, your words carry no weight. Silence, when chosen, isn't weakness. It's clarity in motion. Real-world power move. You're at a family dinner. The usual uncle decides to take a jab. Still single? Maybe you're just too picky for your own good. Everyone laughs. All eyes turn to you. The old version of you explains, justifies, maybe laughs along just to keep the peace. But the trained version of you smile, sip your drink, and let the silence stretch. You don't owe a reaction. You don't feed the moment because you've stopped performing. And that's when the power shifts, not in volume, but in presence. You feel it, that familiar heat rising in your chest. The old version of you might have snapped back with sarcasm, stormed out, or explained yourself for the 100th time. But this version of you stay still. You take a breath, you sip your drink, and you smile, not with spite, but with peace. You say nothing, not because you're suppressing something, but because you've simply outgrown the need to perform. You let the comment hang, right where it belongs. You stay composed, you stay grounded, and in that stillness, you command the entire room without raising your voice. That's mental strength. That's spiritual clarity. That's the quiet energy of someone who no longer shrinks to make others comfortable. Why silence unsettles them. Here's what toxic people can't stand. When the bait stops working, when the flinch never comes, when you don't argue, don't explain, don't react, because now they're left with something they've avoided their whole life, their own inner noise. Silence forces self-confrontation. And people who can't sit with themselves will always try to stir noise in you. But you're not here to be noise. You're here to be clarity, stillness, discipline, power. The takeaway. Silence doesn't mean avoidance. It means refusal. Refusal to feed what doesn't deserve your energy. You don't have to clap back. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to meet them at their level. Because you're not on their level anymore. Let the reactive argue. Let the undisciplined shout. Let the insecure provoke. The wise observe. The strong wait. And you stay silent. Not out of fear, but because you've trained for peace. That isn't weakness. That's the highest form of strength. Here's the paradox. The calmer you become, the more chaotic they get. At first, your silence confuses them. Then, it frustrates them. Eventually, it scares them. Why? Because toxic people don't fear confrontation. They fear irrelevance. And when you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop offering access, they realize something they never expected. They no longer control you. What happens when you go still? Toxic people are like fire. They need oxygen to survive. Your anger is oxygen. Your guilt is oxygen. Your need to be understood is oxygen. But when you stop feeding the fire, it flickers. And in that flicker, something shifts. They feel their grip slipping. So what do? They escalate. They say sharper things. They reach further into your past. They twist the narrative harder. They target what you love, what you've healed from, what you've quietly let go of. It's not personal. It's strategic. They're losing ground, and they know it. Real-world example. Think of someone who once had emotional power over you. An example. A parent. A friend. Every message pulled you into a spiral of guilt, anger, confusion. But one day, you don't respond. No defense. No explanation. No emotional opening. Just silence. Suddenly, they double text. They play the victim. They accuse you of changing. They're not checking on you. They're checking your boundaries, testing to see if your peace is real or just temporary. And when you stay silent, really silent, they get their answer. You've changed, and you're not coming back. This is where most people slip. They mistake chaos for connection. They think that someone fighting for their attention must mean they still care. But the Stoics knew better. They didn't confuse noise for love. They understood. The storm always gets louder before it disappears. Here's the deeper truth. They're not dealing with the same version of you anymore. They're trying to provoke the old you, the one who needed validation, the one who feared being misunderstood, the one who over-explained just to keep the peace. But now, they're met with stillness, and that silence holds up a mirror. It reflects back everything they've been avoiding: insecurity, emptiness, instability. Because when you stop playing the role of their emotional sponge, they're left with nothing to absorb the chaos for them. And they don't know how to handle that. The takeaway: toxic people aren't afraid of what you might say. They're afraid of your detachment. They're not shaken by your anger. They're shaken by your indifference. Because once you've built a mindset rooted in peace, in discipline, in self-respect, they can no longer reach you. Let them twist. Let them shout. Let them spin their narratives. Your only job is simple. Stay calm. Stay grounded. Stay gone. Because the moment you become unshakable, they begin to unravel. The game ends. And that's when you truly win. Not through revenge, but through silence. Toxic people aren't dramatic by accident. They're performers by design. They script guilt trips like rehearsed dialogue. They create tension like it's theater. They live for reaction, for the scene. But here's what no one tells you. They can't perform without an audience. The moment you stop clapping, stop responding, stop playing along, the curtain falls. The show ends the second you leave your seat. Let's say there's someone in your life who always takes center stage. At gatherings, they dominate the conversation. At work, they stir drama, then play the victim. They thrive on noise. They need your reaction, whether it's laughter, frustration, or defense, because your attention validates their role. But what if you walked away mid-scene? What if you didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't explain? What happens next? They scramble, they stutter, they look for a new audience, because the power was never in what they said. It was in what you gave back. A man who can provoke you owns you. The Stoics understood this. The answer isn't confrontation, it's absence. Your emotional energy is currency, and your attention, it's not neutral. It's an investment. Spend it wisely. Toxic people are emotional spenders, but they spend your energy, not theirs. They know how to provoke just enough to pull a reaction, not because they want resolution, but because they want a stage, and they want you seated, engaged, feeding the performance. But something shifts when you realize this. Not everyone deserves a front row seat in your life. That's when you begin to protect your peace, like a high-level executive protects their time. No more over-explaining, no more justifying, no more dancing for approval. What remains? Stillness, clarity, control. Real-world example. You're texting someone who constantly stirs your emotions. They vanish for days, then drop something vague like, "Wow, didn't expect you to act like this. The old you never would." Before, you would have spiraled, typed out paragraphs, tried to fix it, tried to make it make sense. But now, you don't respond. Not from spite, but from principle. You recognize the script, you see the bait, and you choose not to participate. That's not ghosting. That's emotional detachment with intention, and it's one of the most powerful forms of mastery you'll ever learn. Takeaway: toxic people thrive on attention disguised as drama. They bait with guilt. They manipulate with silence. They test with passive aggression. But you've stepped out of the audience. You've walked off the emotional stage. Let them perform for someone else. Your peace isn't a prop. Your mind isn't a venue. And your life is not their theater. In Stoic philosophy, power isn't loud. It's quiet refusal. It's the silent exit from a performance you never auditioned for. And by the time the curtain falls, you're already gone. Here's the truth most avoid. You can block the number, delete the photos, move across the world. But if they still live in your mind, they still hold the power. Because it was never just about physical distance. It was about emotional release. You don't truly walk away from a toxic person by leaving the room. You walk away by walking free, internally. The mind is the real battleground. You've probably said this before. I haven't spoken to them in months, but I still can't stop thinking about what they said. Or, I blocked them, but a part of me still wonders, was I the problem? That's not closure. That's captivity. Here's the deeper truth. They don't need to be in your life to control you. They just need to rent space in your thoughts. And most people keep paying the rent. But Stoicism teaches something radical. Freedom isn't just the absence of conflict. It's the absence of inner slavery. Real-life breakdown. You finally go no contact with someone who drained you for years. No more texts, no more fights, no more drama. But then the silence feels loud. You start replaying moments, rehearsing things you'll never say, wondering what you could have done differently. That's not healing, that's residue. And the work now is not in running further, but in releasing deeper. Because real peace isn't found in blocking them. It's found in unbinding yourself from the need for closure, explanation, or validation. That's not passive, that's power. You catch yourself replaying every conversation, questioning your choices, feeling guilt, even though you were the one who was hurt. What's happening? You didn't cut the attachment. You only cut the access. The bond still lives in your thoughts. You're still trying to earn imaginary approval, still hoping for an apology that may never come, still waiting for them to wake up and say, "You were right." But here's the hard truth. They already know. They just don't care. And the moment you accept that, truly accept it, you reclaim every inch of your emotional power. Letting go doesn't mean losing. Most people fear detachment because it feels like defeat, like giving up, like surrender. But the Stoics didn't let go to lose. They let go to win, internally. Detachment isn't cold, it's clear. It's the quiet choice to stop chasing closure from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need a final conversation. You don't need their apology. You don't need them to see your side. You need peace. You need self-worth that isn't dependent on being validated. You need the discipline to say, "I am no longer available for this cycle." The takeaway: cutting someone off is easy, but cutting off the mental replay, the guilt, the overthinking, the imaginary what-ifs, that's the real work. True detachment isn't when you block them. It's when you no longer seek their reaction to validate your peace. It's when they become just a chapter, not the whole story. When their name brings nothing up, no pain, no fire, no weight, just space. To be free is to no longer be haunted. And when you cut that invisible string, not with bitterness, but with clarity and quiet self-respect, that's when you finally truly walk away. Why toxic people seem powerful? It's not because they're smarter, not because they're stronger, and definitely not because they're right. It's because part of you still wants their approval. You want them to see your effort, to acknowledge your heart, to admit they were wrong, to say, "You didn't deserve that." But here's the truth most people avoid. You don't need their approval. You need your own respect. The root of emotional manipulation. Toxic people don't manipulate you with logic. They manipulate you through your emotional hunger for validation. They sense your insecurities and aim straight at them. They dangle their approval like a prize, then withhold it when you stop conforming. They use silence, sarcasm, and guilt, not because they misunderstand you, but because they understand you all too well. They know what keeps you hooked, and what keeps you hooked is the illusion that if you just try harder, they'll finally treat you right. But that's not love, that's control. As long as you keep chasing their validation, you're putting your self-worth up for sale. Real-life reflection. Think back to the last time someone hurt you emotionally. You knew they crossed a line. You knew something wasn't right. But still, part of you wanted to win them back, to fix it, to prove your worth. And now, maybe it's time to stop proving and start honoring the version of you who finally sees it clearly. You didn't deserve what happened, but instead of walking away, you explained, you pleaded, you waited for a maybe. Why? Because deep down, you believed that if they approved of you again, you'd finally feel okay. But here's the Stoic truth. No one can hand you self-worth. It has to be built, not borrowed. Their approval isn't peace. It's a drug, temporary, unreliable, addictive. What real self-respect looks like. Self-respect doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand applause. It's quiet. It's clear. It's walking away without theatrics. It's choosing not to reply to that manipulative message, not out of bitterness, but because your clarity no longer allows you to engage. It's knowing you don't have to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. And when that truth truly lands, everything changes. You stop chasing closure. You stop begging to be seen. You stop lowering your standards just to keep a connection alive. You stop trading your peace for someone else's comfort. The Stoic alternative to approval. The Stoics didn't seek recognition. They didn't need applause. They anchored themselves in virtue, not validation. Marcus Aurelius put it simply: ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Approval can be taken. Self-respect is built. Internal, unshakable, non-negotiable. You build it when you hold your boundary, even when it's lonely, when you choose silence instead of explaining yourself again, when you walk away with your dignity intact, and no one can take that from you. The takeaway. You don't need them to tell you you're enough. You need to believe it, especially if they never will. You don't need their attention. You need to stop giving them the power to decide how you feel. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who failed to see it in the first place. You don't need applause. You need to stop performing. Because when you choose self-respect over approval, you stop being controlled. You stop being manipulated. You stop bending yourself to fit a mold that was never designed for you. And that's when something powerful happens. You become whole again. Not because they finally gave you what you needed, but because you gave it to yourself. Yes, you've been hurt. Not just irritated, not just disappointed, wounded by someone who knew where to cut and chose to do it anyway. Maybe it was betrayal. Maybe it was manipulation. Maybe it was the slow erosion of your confidence by someone who claimed to care. Whatever it was, you carry the scar. But now comes the real question. What are you going to do with it? Pain is a tool if you learn how to use it. Most people take one of two roads. They bury the pain, or they live inside it, replaying it, hoping for closure. But Stoicism offers a third path: transform it. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius. You don't avoid pain. You study it. You learn from it. And you use it to sharpen yourself. The power of constructive anger. There's a kind of anger that destroys, and a kind that rebuilds. If you channel pain into revenge or bitterness, it poisons you. But if you channel it through discipline, clarity, and direction, it becomes fuel. You don't scream. You build. You don't argue for validation. You validate yourself through action, through growth, through self-mastery. You turn rejection, shame, and being overlooked into quiet, focused momentum. That's not denial. That's alchemy, real-life reflection. You were in a relationship where love felt like a test. You gave your best, and still, it wasn't enough. You broke. You begged. You tried to be more, and still, they made you feel like less. But now, you heal, you train, you rise, you build a life rooted in peace, purpose, and power. And they become just a footnote in your story, not the headline. You stop living in reaction. You start living in rebirth. And no, it's not to prove them wrong. It's to prove to yourself that they never had the final say in who you'd become. Pain can refine you or define you. It's inevitable. But what it turns you into, that's your choice. Toxic people want your pain to define you, to keep you small, unsure, unfinished. But when you use it to build clarity, to strengthen your values, to elevate your standard of peace, you don't become angry. You become untouchable. I survived you. I grew from what you tried to break. And now I am someone you can no longer reach. Final takeaway. The pain they caused, it isn't your shame. It's your source code. It's the evidence that you didn't quit. It's the start of your higher self. So don't run from it. Don't drown in it. Use it. Turn it into strength. Turn it into standards. Turn it into silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes. Because the most powerful revenge was never a reaction. It was always your evolution. In the end, the strongest move isn't to come back louder. It's to not come back at all. No outburst, no long message, no last word, just presence, just peace, just stillness. Because once you stop reacting, you stop giving away the only thing toxic people truly feed on: control. Power isn't loud, it's still. The loudest voice, the sharpest words, the strongest reaction. That's what we're taught power looks like. But real power, stoic power, doesn't shout, it doesn't chase, it doesn't react. It watches, it waits, it refuses to be moved. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." In other words, no one can shake you unless you let them. And once you truly understand that, you become unreachable, a moment of mastery. You get a message, it's charged, accusatory, manipulative. The old you would have typed back a wall of text, cried, explained, defended. But now, you read it. You see it for what it is, a trap. And you don't respond, not out of spite, but because you've simply outgrown the level where that conversation exists. That's not avoidance. That's evolution. That's non-reaction as conscious mastery. And that's your turning point. What non-reaction actually is. Non-reaction is not apathy. It's not pretending you don't feel. It's choosing not to act from woundedness. It's spiritual strength. It means you've trained your nervous system. You've studied your triggers. You've rewritten your identity. Not to suppress emotion, but to refuse enslavement to it. This is mental discipline at its highest level, the ability to stay still in a storm, the refusal to let chaos decide your course. I don't need to win. I just need to stay free. Here's the truth. Toxic people don't vanish because you confront them. They fade away when they realize they no longer have access to your attention. And that moment doesn't come from shouting, proving, or defending. It comes from something much quieter. Non-reaction. The decision to stay silent. The refusal to engage. The choice to protect your inner stillness like sacred ground. Because once you stop reacting, you stop bleeding energy. You stop playing their game. You stop being controlled. And that's when you become dangerous, in the best possible way. You don't rise through retaliation. You rise through peace, through self-possession, through detachment. They fade into background noise, because the most effective response was never to beat them. It was to become someone they could no longer reach. This is what becoming untouchable looks like. Not because you blocked them, not because you burned a bridge, but because you built something stronger, a fortress within yourself. You didn't destroy them. You didn't need to. You simply stopped allowing them to live in your mind, rent-free. And in doing so, you became something rare, something unshakable. You stopped reacting because you finally remembered who you are. Let them perform. Let them twist the story. Let them shout into silence. You're not there anymore. Not mentally, not emotionally, not spiritually. And in that absence, they lose all power. Because the fire only burns as long as you keep feeding it. If this message resonated with you, if you felt seen or steady or even challenged, then this is just the beginning of your inner transformation. Tell us, what's one toxic situation you're finally ready to stop reacting to? Leave a comment below. Let your stillness inspire someone else. Subscribe to Think Stoic 101 for weekly guidance on building the strongest version of yourself from the inside out, and turn on the bell. Because peace isn't just a feeling, it's a practice. And each week, we sharpen it together. Remember, you don't win by reacting. You win by remembering your worth and rising beyond the noise.